First of all, it's really nice to be here. And instead of Mr. Pieronek, it's Tom.
Okay.
All right, that makes it easy from the beginning. What was really nice about hearing the introduction was, I think it's March 31st that our PM&P goals are due. So this gave me a little refresher what I need to type my goals into, right? If it says it on there and I do it, then we're all in sync. Then we have that one-to-one connection. As indicated, last November, I spoke for 3 minutes. And this was for a Connect 1 NG event. And my topic was called Improv Rules. And Improv Rules is a play on a term. What I want to start this off with is asking you, who has seen improv comedy? So, where? On TV and live in the theater?
Club, yeah.
And a comedy club, which ones? Do you have to
The one in
remember?
Ha Ha Factory,
The Ha Ha Factory,
in
okay.
North Hollywood.
Who else?
Groundlings?
Groundlings, yep. Where else?
There's a place in Hermosa, I'm blank on the name, but
The Comedy Magic Theater
yeah,
in Hermosa,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so some excellent examples of and but not.
And but not, right. So we call that yes and, which is one of the rules of improv. In my bio, it said that I went to University of Southern California, had a master's in engineering management. Then I went on to study systems architecting, how to build large, complex systems. While I was there, to relax, and I was doing that while working full-time, I would go to watch improv comedy. And the place that I would go was the Groundlings. I felt it was the best comedy in LA. What is improv comedy? Improv comedy is creating the essence of the scene organically. You don't pre-plan. Nothing is given to you before. There's no script. There's no speech. You just start and you continue. And you don't know when you're going to end. The end is called by a director. You may be one person, 2 people, 6 people. And you're on stage, and you're given a clue. You're given a hint. Once the hint starts, perhaps it's a place, perhaps it's a relationship, perhaps it's anything. You take over from there. What seems to be really neat about improv is when you're good, it almost seems fake. Think of the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Wayne Brady and company. When they start creating a scene, you can't help but think, that was planned. It was so smooth, it flowed, that they must have rehearsed it. What's interesting is that the way improv works is it's guided by a series of rules. And if you understand the rules, and if you stick to the rules, you can create something organically in that space, in that time, regardless of what's given to you. The first rule of improv is agree. Whatever's created, you must agree. So you never say no in improv. If I'm taking a sip, coffee, it's coffee. It's not a beer, it's not a milkshake. If I've got a partner on the scene, you agree. What agreement does is it moves the scene along. If we're fighting over a small item, or we're disagreeing about a small item, then we can't move it forward. We can't move the scene forward. And the audience wants to see the scene go forward. They want to see it build. Ultimately, they want to see you get into a position where you're uncomfortable. And then you see what happens. They want to see you walk on the edge of the plank. So if you agree on the little things, you can never really make it that far. Your argument and your argumentative at the start. When I look at how that rule applies in work, the same thing occurs. When you start a presentation, when you start a discussion, when you start a conversation, are you picking at the little things in it, or are you agreeing first? Once you start agreeing and you set a pattern of that, you can move the conversation forward. Second thing is, as you pointed out, there's this comment called yes and. Once you agree, it's different if you simply say yes. This is a cup of coffee. I'm drinking a cup of coffee. Someone can say, hey, you're drinking coffee. If I were to respond yes, again, we stall. We stall out, right? When building aircraft, what's the number one thing? You gotta have airspeed. A lot of things you can do to fix a lot of things if you have airspeed, right? Keep it going. When you have, in improv, it's that yes and. I'm drinking a cup of coffee. Yes, and it's ice cold. Now you're adding something a little bit different, an element. You're adding some information to the equation. And improv typically goes back and forth in a dialogue sense. And the fact that now it's ice cold means it's a new piece of information. The most critical item, or another rule of improv, I'll call it number 3, is the listening rule. When you listen, when you add information, the best scenes take what has been said most recently and grabs onto that and goes. Such that the fact that it's now an ice-cold cup of coffee allows somebody else to say, what did you expect? We're at the North Pole. Now we've taken it from a cup of coffee, it's ice cold, and now you're at the North Pole. That takes you in a whole different direction. That is probably the number one rule that I use out of it from improv in my daily job. Just you listen to the last thing that's being said. If you can comment on the last thing that somebody has just said, talk about the last part of your speech, not about why and how and what you want to do. If you can comment on the last thing, somebody understands or believes in some cases that you've been listening the whole way. You're adding that piece. When you agree, when you add information, and when you're listening, you're moving this conversation and this relationship along. If we now talk about the North Pole, now you're jumping back to that coffee, or you're starting us at a different point, you're stalling things. And also, if you jump back to the coffee versus the North Pole, you're not necessarily listening to the last thing that I've said. You wanted to make a point, about something, and it stalls the scene. And in improv, you never want to stall the scene. You keep wanting it to go and move in interesting directions. Another rule of improv is you never ask questions. On stage, you never ask questions. Hey, are we at the North Pole because we landed here by accident? Well, that's not as much fun as, hey, our spaceship came down on the wrong coordinates. That's why we're in the North Pole. It's a statement versus a question. A statement allows you to, again, add information, build the scene, and from a personal perspective, it gives confidence in the speaker. Statement gives confidence in the speaker. When you continually ask questions, you're putting the onus on the other party to answer or provide information. And in times, you're looking less authoritative, less knowledgeable, less a subject matter expert, what you're trying to convey. As you're learning in Toastmasters, part of it is the information. But a large part is how you convey that information. What do you say about it, and how do you say it? It could be the same information, the same speech, but delivered in two different ways. You get two different results. So what I've learned from improv is to take the rules about no questions, bring it forward. Make a statement. Now, it doesn't mean in our line of work, you don't ask questions. You can ask a question to move it along. But if you ask a question, ask it in a sense that adds in information, adds clarification, adds substance to it. It's not just a station-keeping question. It's not just to show that you know something and you want the speaker to hear. You want to add in information along the way. There's another one which says, there are no mistakes, only opportunities. So Tina Fey wrote a book called Bossy Pants. Mm-hmm. And she's a comedian actress, and she wrote a book. She actually goes through these 4 rules of improv and talks about the workplace in that book. She talks about no mistakes, only opportunities. So the fact is, you may want to be a policeman in a scene. All of a sudden, your partner has put you in a hamster wheel. Okay? You're now starting off the scene in a hamster wheel. What do? Do you stop the scene and say you're a policeman, or do you go with the hamster wheel? Being a hamster on a wheel allows you to think very differently, very creatively about the scene. If you're still really itching to be a policeman, you could be a policeman on the hamster wheel because you're now on hamster duty, right? So, or you're doing a stakeout in the pet store, and what better way to hide? and amongst all the cedar shavings and the hamster wheel, right? But you take that and you make that an opportunity. A lot of times what we brief, what we plan, how we plan to go into a meeting, when you come out of it, it didn't go the way you thought. Right? You started off with the direction and it didn't go the way you thought. Two ways that could have happened. One, you had some bad planning at the start, and it was never going to reach that successful conclusion. A whole nother way is that the meeting took a different turn. And everybody took a turn in that meeting except you. So the ability to understand that it's an opportunity. Your plan might have been a good jumping off point, but maybe it's not the best point relative to the consensus of the group and how to go forward. That's a lesson that you look at relative to your daily work. We'll take that other point. What happens if you just had a bad plan going in? Another rule of improv is who, what, where. Who, what, where. There are two of us on the stage. In the first two lines of dialogue, you need to get out the who, what, where. Who are we? Where are we? And what is our relationship to each other? If you can get that out in the first two lines of dialogue, you've got a scene created and an understanding with your partner or partners on stage, and you've brought in the audience to the same thing. There was an element one day where we were in class, and the scene was bus stop. Two people sitting on a bench at a bus stop. So two of us were on the chairs, sitting next to each other. So they gave us the who. The what are we doing there, and who we are to each other needed to come out immediately. So one line could say, it's great to see you 20 years after high school. So that establishes like who we are. We know each other in terms of where we came from. You know something about both. Then the other one adds in information in the sense of cheerleading conventions rarely occur. I'm glad we did it here in the bus terminal. So, who we are, we're obviously 20 years out, cheerleaders in the bus terminal. And that scene went on to develop really interesting. That scene went on to get to this point of somebody being on the plank. So we talked about our history of cheerleading together. You know that you've got to keep adding and building to the scene. I recall turning to my partner at one point, and he said, and I said to him, I said, you know, all this talk is great. You were known for your, what I call it, the flying double twist. Do it for me now. All right. So at that point, now the audience is there. What is the flying double twist? He looks at you and why. Well, there are a lot of ways to add information to a scene. I made a request. I didn't say, can you do it? Because he could say no. I said, do it for me now. You make it a statement. To move a scene along in improv, you can use dialogue, which is what I've been talking about. You can use space work. You can change how you are on the stage. You can start polishing a mirror or polishing something, some action. You can pick up something off of a table. That's space work. It's creating that whole scene, that whole environment that you're in. It's one thing. You can also change your character. You can talk in an accent. Man can be a woman. You can become old. You can become young. You can be a plumber in a scene where you're now in the superior court and you're a plumber, judging whatever it is. You can change it in a number of ways. And that also adds in information. In the scene with the cheerleading, for example, when I asked him to do the famous double twist, and I got off the stage and I went down, put my hands down so that he could presumably put his foot in there to do something. At that moment, you're in the scene and you're committed. You've got to do it. He got up, put his foot in, did a jump, did a dance, and carried on. And the audience clapped and he blacked out. It's about taking it to the next level. It's adding the opportunity for the scene to go and to keep going. A lot of what we do in work when we talk to customers, we come in and we want to talk. We want to keep making our point clear. Sometimes it's good to add some information look at them, see what information they're adding, and try to build the scene to accomplish something that we really want. That gets back again to the who, what, where. The who, what, where. When you're briefing, who are you? What is the relationship of you to the audience? Where are you? Is it in a small setting? Is it one-on-one in a cube or an office? Is it in an auditorium? What are those things? Factor those in. What are we trying to accomplish? A lot of the briefings that we give don't get that who, what, where right at the start. And when you don't get the who, what, where, it takes a bad turn right at the start. If you're not able to use some of the rules of improv, as I've done a few times, to get it back on course, you go down this path that'll never meet the objectives. And it becomes one of those bad meetings. Why am I presenting this data? It doesn't matter. You didn't know. It wasn't relevant in any sense of the word. So I started to study improv to relax, to enjoy. They asked me, or they posted a sign one day outside that said, if you wanted to join and try out for the class, you can. Try out for the school. So I did. I tried out for the Groundling School. They asked for a headshot and a bio. So I was in there with all these actresses and actors that had long bios, long headshots of every different thing. I walked up, gave them my business card. It was from TRW at the time. And I said, all my acting experiences on the back. They flipped it over, it was blank. They looked at me and said, you're in. So that became 3 years of studying improv. I performed once on the stage outside, mostly in class. The best thing about improv, though, was you talked about how your parents had wanted to train you, for a good spouse, etc. I met my wife in improv. And if you do something that you both enjoy, and then even outside of class you're laughing more than in class, you know that something's good, something's right. So it's been a really good thing for me, and I've used it mostly at work, and I continue to use it. So thanks.
Thank you. Wow, I've got a page full of notes.
All right.
But they are meaningful because we'll be sure to share